their social fabric, and quite frankly, how that's been changing over time. As many of you know, the U.S. has been going through a number of really important energy transitions, both on the oil and gas side of the equation, but also in terms of electric power. With advanced technologies, new policies, different priorities, different consumer preferences, it's really a time of profound transition. And we thought, as a public education institution, the most important thing that we could do was start to bring some of that nuance about the energy discussions, the very robust energy discussions that are going on at a state and regional level, and try and translate a little bit of that back to the federal level policy discussion that we're having on energy. I can think of no better way of kicking off a series like this than with the two speakers that we've got here today, Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska and Senator Maria Cantwell from Washington State. So thank you very much for being with us. And I say it's a great way to start off the session, not only because they're from two very important and, quite frankly, quite different states in the United States in terms of their energy profile, but they're also the leadership of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, one of the most bipartisan, well-functioning, and leading groups on energy policy that we have. And at this particularly important, you get a fist bump. That's right. You deserve that.
Yes.
So what we'd like to do today is have a little bit of a discussion about the states that you both represent. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you see energy policy evolving over this year and perhaps the next couple of years. Senator Murkowski, I'd like to start with you. So you're from Alaska, and Alaska is one of these states where people know a bit about it in terms of the fact that you produce a good deal of oil. Some people may know that you're the first state to export LNG, right? And you're well known for the abundant sort of natural resources that you have, the beauty of the state, but also the really harsh environment as well. And this makes Alaskans somewhat self-reliant, right? And certainly very interested in sort of being stewards of the resources in that state as well. But I'm not sure we know the full story about what's going on with the energy sector in Alaska today as you see it. Would you open this conversation up for us and tell us a little bit about how you see the role of energy in the economy and the social fabric in Alaska?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Alaska is truly one of those all of the above states when it comes to our energy resources, whether it is our prolific oil and natural gas reserves, whether it's the mineral resources that we have, our coal, our biomass. We have extraordinary renewables. People don't think about Alaska as a solar producing state, but quite honestly, we're seeing more and more that are looking at solar, wind. We have the incredible opportunities available to us through marine hydrokinetic, our hydropower in the southeastern part of the state. We really do have a view of energy from a very, very broad spectrum. Our big challenge has been accessing it. When you are a state that is 1/5 the size of the United States of America, that is primarily rural and beyond rural, we call it bush, it makes it difficult and expensive to access your resources because we're simply not connected. Over 80% of the communities in the state of Alaska are not connected by road. Mm-hmm. And when you think about what that does and how that's a cost driver, access to our energy resources makes it very, very difficult. We have been blessed, though. I mentioned our oil, and that's probably what most people know Alaska's energy picture to be. And in fairness, it's about 1/3 of our overall state's economy is reliant on that oil and gas sector from a revenue perspective and from a jobs perspective where you're related. Our state's budget looks at about 80% of our revenues coming directly from oil. So when prices are down, when production is down, that means that our treasury is down. Right now, we are in a recession in Alaska with a capital R, as identified by the economists that are following what's happening with jobs and the local economy. We have the second highest unemployment in the country right now. And so much of this is because we are an oil-dependent state. So for us right now, part of our challenge is how there can be greater access to resource. And again, not just greater access to oil, but to our natural gas. We have a long-awaited natural gas pipeline that is still out on the horizon. We do have some good news for us in terms of our opportunities to do more. There's no shortage of the resource, and that has been confirmed with recent discoveries by Repsol, by Armstrong, by Conoco. Operations in the north have continued to be, I think, just really very promising. We saw the president just last week with the executive order that would allow for a new look at the offshore leases in the Beaufort and the Chukchi, and the 12A withdrawal that President Obama made under the OCS. So that will put an open sign up on the North Slope, which will be again a promise for the future. But our reality right now is a state that is suffering from the effects of not being able to fill up our Trans-Alaska pipeline, not being able to access those resources. But if people think that Alaska is oil only, it belies the real efforts that we have done as a state to be doing more when it comes to all of the above. Part of what we've seen with this slowdown in production and the limitation on the resources that have come to the state, it used to be through the state treasury and the state renewable fund that's how we were able to provide for financing and assistance to some of the small microgrids in these small remote communities that are still faced with energy production by diesel. So how we can help transform it, we look to our oil resources to help fund that next generation of energy innovation within our state. So we're all of the above in every sense of the word. Access has always been the challenge. But I think there is a sense of optimism in the state with the ability to work with an administration that will be more supportive of access to the resource.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, I think it's a really good lesson to be derived from Alaska for the rest of the country, whereas, we often, in terms of energy security, think about resource availability as being the secret to security. But if you can't get the resources to where the consumption centers are, it really doesn't matter very much, right? I mean, that access question or that infrastructure question is really 90% of the game in some ways. But the other part is that Alaska, because of as you said, the state revenue portion of it is very open to fluctuations in commodity markets as well. And we are heading back into a period of oil market rebalance. That must bring some optimism to Alaska as well. But as we've seen in our work here, that during periods of low prices, there actually can be adjustments that go on at the state level. Have you seen that kind of growth or change in Alaska and how they think about insulating themselves from, as a state, from sort of the variability of oil markets over this period of time?
Well, the variability of oil prices is just a reality, and I think it's important to not get yourself so fixated on the price today. Mm-hmm. You've got to recognize that it is going to move around, and we understand that. So making a decision based on the price today isn't going to work in a state like Alaska, particularly a state like Alaska, where it takes so long to get these projects online because of the access issues, because of the cost issues, because of the fact that you have a very, very, very limited season for exploration or production when you're working in an Arctic environment. But when you look at what has happened just in the past couple years up on the North Slope and the level of interest that we have seen from some of the smaller operators, more of the independents coming in and really finding not new areas, but new ways, new technologies, the opportunities that are now made available just because smart men and women have been working hard to figure out how do you get more out of that lemon. and doing it in a way that is cost efficient, works with the environment, but allows you to basically access more from the areas that we have seen levels of production that have been encouraging, but now we're able to go in and even produce more. So that's kind of the transition that we have seen from kind of the big producers that were up there historically with the beginning of Prudhoe Bay. There has been really a transition, a transformation in who is operating, how they're operating with the joint ventures and the consolidations. It has been it's been a maturing industry up in the state, and I think that that's an important part of the progress that you see within the industry in Alaska right now.
Okay, well, and we'll get back to that too when we talk about some of the potential implications of the new sort of access policies of the new administration and things like that. But Senator Cantwell, so Washington State, very different from Alaska, right?
Very different.
Very different from Alaska. And what most people know about Washington State is your huge and abundant sort of hydropower resources, certainly, but also the innovative nature of the state, the sort of entrepreneurial sort of innovation companies that you've got in the state as well. You do have a refinery and you do have a trading relationship with Alaska, if I'm not mistaken. How would you characterize the role that energy plays in Washington State, and not just from sort of a supply-demand, where do you get your resources from, but also what it means to the people of Washington State?
Well, thanks for having us here, and thanks for the opportunity. And Senator Murkowski and I love working together and working on so many important policy issues for the nation, but we do enjoy a Pacific Northwest relationship that we think is also a very good perspective to bring to the table. So it's great to be with her today. I guess the best story I could tell about why energy is so important to our state is people know I got elected in a very close election in 2000. In fact, I found out 3 weeks after the election that I won. And I came here, I found out on a Friday, showed up on a Monday morning. First thing I did, I went to Tom Daschle, who was the majority leader, to say, what committee assignments could I get? And as I'm waiting in the outer office, the phone rings. And somebody says, the phone is for you. And I thought, nobody even knows I'm here. Who could possibly be calling me? And I pick up the phone, and it's my then colleague, Congressman Norm Dix. And he says, Maria, you have to get on the Energy Committee. And I was like, Norm, how did you even know I was here? He said, listen, this is the first test. You have to get on the Energy Committee. And I said, well, what if I can't get on the Energy Committee? He said, if you don't get on the Energy Committee, Scoop Jackson's going to roll over in his grave. And of course, I went in and asked to be on the Energy Committee. And I think that shows you a little bit about the political ethos of why it has grown up to be that level of focus for us. And that is because a cheap hydro system, 3-cent kilowatt electricity, has driven our economy over and over and over and over and over again. So it helped us when we needed to store fruit. It helped us when we needed to build aluminum. It helped us when we needed to be competitive, in other sectors, and it's helping us today as we store bits instead of apples. And so everybody in the Northwest knows that energy costs, being as low as possible, which is part of the challenge and the antithesis of what we see in Alaska, and why I want to work so well with my colleague in Alaska, because what benefits Alaska in the context of growing an economy also benefits Washington State, and one of their biggest challenges is the cost of energy. And so if we can continue to make advancements on driving down the cost of energy in other parts, we want to do that. So you mentioned the second phenomena. So first, the hydro system of decades of cheap hydro created economic opportunity after industry after industry after industry wanted to locate close to that cheap hydro. In fact, people might know the i3 BMW car located their plant in Washington State just recently because they wanted to say that the car was totally renewable. They loved the cheap hydro, and they wanted to say that the car was totally made with renewable energy. So it keeps coming. The second phenomena that is helping us is the phenomena and integration of software into energy. So whether that's in smart buildings that are driving the efficiency that businesses need, whether that's in transmission in general, whether that's in the efficiencies that we're now seeing in solar and wind, in the navigation and helping and the efficiency there, or whether it's just in the hydro system itself, because we've had to make that more energy efficient. So it's almost like you had decades of an ethos about very, very cheap power, now put on top of it a next generation technology that is also helping to drive efficiency. So when we think about it, we don't think that, we think about it almost in a global sense. How are smart grids, energy efficiencies, how do we as a region and a country capitalize on what we think is probably like a $4 trillion economic opportunity around the globe, because efficiency, energy efficiency is always going to help you be competitive. And so I think we think of it in the context of the science budget and the investment in that, and how do we keep moving forward on that side of the equation.
And we were talking a little bit before. I mean, there's a lot of focus, and we speak with countries from around the world on how the U.S. has done really remarkable things in producing more oil and gas from unconventionals, and the real renaissance that has happened in the industry on that side. There is less focus on the amazing transformations that are going on in the electric power sector. And I think if you listen to the FERC sessions over the last 2 days about all of the changes that are taking place in electricity markets that are really driven by some of what you're talking about, which is the integration of knowledge and software and new technologies into the electric power sector. There really is quite a bit going on. You were talking about some big purchasers within Washington State thinking about doing things in innovative ways. I mean, is that something you want to talk a little bit more about? Or?
Well, there are transitional moments in all of this, and I definitely think that when our former governor was ambassador to China and he put a measurement on the embassy that showed exactly what the pollution level really was in China, and an app that went had millions of people looking at that data and information, and the Chinese government shifted a little bit towards, let's put the pedal to the metal on on the renewable side. That definitely was the same kind of moment that we're having in the United States, but a little differently. All of us have seen the transition that the digital age is bringing in other sectors, whether it's telecom or movie content. Well, yes, it's going to bring about a little different empowerment of individuals and companies. So yes, we have, last night I attended the Internet Association dinner with Jeff Bezos as the keynote speaker, and he told the crowd how he plans to buy 100% of his energy from renewable sources, and he's going to basically go into the energy business, the actual direct purchasing. Microsoft's doing the same thing, Google is doing the same thing. So big players are going to start to drive this transition that I know is going to be a hard transition for all of us. What does the energy provider of the future look like? What does a utility look like? And we're going to have a lot of discussions about that, because there's a lot of individuals that want to be compensated for their contribution to that. There's a lot of, so it's it's not going to be an easy process, but it's going to be one that's going to happen whether we want it to happen or not. Yeah. And so I think the question is, what are the key ways in which we can help our nation be competitive by keeping affordable energy rates? Because in a global economy, it will be a deciding factor in helping us be competitive on a global, particularly on things like manufacturing.
So now for both of you, we've talked a little bit about the sort of profile of the state and some of what's going on in each of your states, but what do you hear from people, right, about their energy priorities? And we talk a lot about here and lots of other places about sort of the triangle in energy, right? You have affordability, you've got security, and you've got environmental impact. And depending on what the price of energy is, right, or where the economy stands, or how much concern there is over various environmental impacts, whether it's local air pollution or climate change, we can, as a population, we can kind of move around that, priority set pretty liberally, always caring about all of them, of course, but, sometimes veering more towards one, towards the other. Right now, what is it that you think are really driving the population of Alaska or the population of Washington, the citizenry, in terms of their energy priorities? What is preeminent in their mind and right about now? I want to start with you.
Well, certainly from Alaska's perspective, it's the issue of cost. Cost is it. In fact, I probably here at previous CSIS discussions have had an opportunity to talk about my view of energy policy. Five concepts, basically: accessibility, affordability, clean, diverse, and secure. And I always say there's no acronym for that. We've just arranged it alphabetically for ease of memory. And I distill it all in, look, energy is good. I can put that on a bumper sticker, but how we view energy and what it provides to us. Listening to Senator Cantwell talking about what it means for a state, what it means for a region when you have affordable energy, you have an economy.
Yep.
You have people that come to you because they want to be able to say, this is 100% renewable, the manufacturing of this vehicle. They come because it is affordable, and thus what they will then produce is affordable. So in Alaska, we're kind of sitting back looking at this with great envy almost, and recognizing that in order for us to have energy costs that are affordable, we have got to be creative. Mm-hmm. And so I mentioned just a bit ago some of the focus on how we can move towards small microgrids to get these communities off of expensive diesel. There's nothing that anybody likes about diesel, but that's how your lights stay on. That's how you stay warm in a cold winter. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing to develop these smaller microgrids where you take a few wind turbines combined with some solar, combined with some heating stoves that provide for the heat inside your home, and all of a sudden you've got a situation where you are maybe not 100% off diesel, but you've gotten yourself 70% off.
Right. Yeah.
And that is dramatic. That is transformative. Mm-hmm. And if you're a small community of 400 or 500 people, this is making a difference. But if we cannot work to reduce our energy costs in Alaska, it will stall us out in terms of being a growing economy. Mm-hmm. In parts of the state right now, you have families that are spending more than half of their income to stay warm and to keep lights on. That does not work. I often tell the story of being out in a river community up on the Yukon River, Aniak, not so small community, but having a woman come up to me. She had a 3-month-old little baby that she had taken in as a foster care child, and she handed me her fuel bill. It's just a paper ticket. It's for $50. $50 for 5 gallons of home heating fuel. Wow. And she said, I had to make a decision yesterday as to whether I was going to try to keep the house warm or whether I was going to be able to buy formula. Well, when you're in Aniak, formula for the baby doesn't come cheap either. And I've carried that little receipt that she gave me. That was years ago. But as a reminder that we can talk policy all we want here in Washington, D.C., but what it means to the families back home about truly what are we doing to make a difference in reducing the cost to these people. Mm-hmm. Because it's not just about keeping the lights on and keeping your home warm. It then translates to every other aspect of their world. So if you're running a small grocery store out in Aniak, in order to keep refrigerated products, how do you pay the cost?
Yeah, right.
And Senator Cantwell was with me when we went on a rural trip a couple years ago. We went out to Koniganuk, I think, or no, Kasigaluk.
All those names I can't pronounce.
All the names that she can't pronounce. Small village community, had an opportunity to go into the store there and see the cost of goods to families.
Yeah. Yeah.
$50 for a box of Tide. Everybody needs to wash your clothes at some point in time, but $50 for washing detergent. Right. So recognizing that in so many of these places, the cost to live there is almost prohibitive. So everything that I can do to try to drive down the cost is important. But as you point out, I live in a state that's extraordinarily beautiful. We want to keep it that way. We care for the environment. And so making sure that there is a consideration for how we access our resources so it is not at the expense of our environment has got to be a concern and a priority. In Alaska, we don't talk about whether or not climate change is theoretical or something that some scientist is talking about. People are observing the changes around it. Yeah. They realize that we have a responsibility to do what we can when it comes to concerns that are not only local but that are global. Yeah. And so there is a broader perspective there. But at the end of the day, what that family wants to know is, what have you done today, Lisa, to help me reduce the cost of my energy?
Well, and I think the examples you bring up, especially about microgrids, while they are sometimes hard to execute and hard to scale and those sorts of things, they are a solution that speaks to all of the concerns, right? I mean, it is a climate-friendly solution. It is a resilience-oriented solution. It's a cost reduction solution, hopefully. So that does sort of seem like a good area where you can make all of those things match.
We need to figure out what the local energy solutions are. Because it's going to be different if you're in a small, remote community versus being in Washington State where you have extraordinary hydropower resources and access to a grid. But when we try to say there's a one-size-fits-all solution, it doesn't work.
What about that? What about the sort of citizens of Washington State? You mentioned the sort of long-held appreciation for low energy prices and what it's done for the economy in Washington. Is that what most Washington State folks are thinking about these days, is low energy prices, or do they have other priorities on their mind?
I definitely think that Washington State is very green, and there's a lot of people who want to talk about how do we preserve the environment. It's not like we don't have our own challenges with hydro and salmon. Okay, sure. So it's not like there aren't issues there. So, but I really do think that it's this, innovation culture. Maybe FDR had it right. He looked at that part of the country and he said, okay, how are these guys going to be competitive being this far away? And let's build cheap hydro. But now, I think it's that competitiveness that's still driving it. I think when I think about why did Boeing say, I want a more fuel efficient plane in the 87? Was it because they thought Europe was going to bang on them about a fee because they weren't, they were burning too much fuel? Or did Boeing want to beat the marketplace with a more fuel efficient plane because their customers were saying, I want a more fuel efficient plane? I'm pretty sure it was the latter. Why do we have the highest install of electric vehicles today? Because everybody is in love with Leo DiCaprio? No, I think that we have the highest installation because people know that if you have an electric vehicle, oh my gosh, you can hook it up to the cheap hydro that we have, and ding, 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 I save money. So I think for us, we are innovators, and I do think there's a lot of early adopters. I think it's the level of science and innovation that is already there. But as I said, I think it's like in the water. Everybody gets that, efficiency and energy efficiency drives benefit in major ways. Mm-hmm. And so the consumer who does care, about the environment and does care about where we're going and is vocal about that, but is way more focused on what they can do. So the number of, I think of people like Ed Schweitzer over in Pullman, Washington with Schweitzer Engineering. Hardly somebody, I think, that sits around thinking about climate change every day. But Ed Schweitzer is, next generation syncophasers to make the grid more efficient. Or McKinstry in downtown Seattle. Again, maybe they think about that, but I think he thinks, how am I going to grow my business? And he's got the smart building market and moving very fast in that. So I think people just they see both, but they really are about that competitiveness that's been driven in innovating and keeping going on innovation.
I was just going to say it's remarkable how strong the thread of international competitiveness is in some of your comments, and I think it's right for every state. Even though we think about states having kind of a parochial view, they exist in a global economy. And so thinking about your competitiveness, whether it's an LNG export project or if the competitiveness of particular industries, it really does matter in shaping the way that a state approaches how it thinks about energy policy. Yeah. Well, I want to ask you both. So you have, as you fist bumped earlier to celebrate, you do run a very functional and forward-looking committee, and that is to be appreciated. And so what is it over the next year, as you look ahead towards, and thinking about some of the things that you've talked about from your state perspective, how does that translate into some of the work that you hope the committee is going to be able to get done over the course of the year? And then maybe a second turn on that question, because I do want to allow the audience to ask you some of their questions too, is much of what we're seeing happen on the energy agenda from the executive branch, from this administration, isn't really about energy fundamentally. It's about a deregulatory agenda. It's about a tax agenda. It's about an infrastructure agenda, all of which really do impact the energy sector. So given sort of that environment, that policy environment that we're in, but then also what you hope to get done in the committee, what do you think that this year can bring, and what are some of the things that you're looking to do together?
Well, I have promised, and I know that Senator Cantwell has made the same commitments, that we're not done with our energy bill that we advanced last year. That was an effort, that was a bipartisan effort that deserves to be enacted into law. And we will see that through. And I think that is, that's a statement that you can take to the bank. I can't give you a date on it, but by gosh, when you have something that is that good, that enjoys that level of bipartisan support, when was the last time you saw a significant legislative bill that had 85 members of the Senate voting to support it? Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you when it was. It was last year with our energy bill. And we think that we can continue to build on that effort, that framework. So what we are working to do now as a chairman and ranking member working with our committee is to re-up that measure through some Senate-passed bills, through things that our committee has reviewed. But again, to look at what we had prepared as a committee in a very open, very collaborative way. When you have the input of over 70 members of the Senate, which is ultimately where we ended up through the amendment process and the various measures that we included, that's about as inclusive a process and a measure as you can get nowadays. And that's something that I'm very proud of. But it doesn't come easy. Yeah. It requires a great deal of work, and this is where I think you see with Senator Cantwell and myself a commitment to work together. We do not agree on every energy issue. Again, that shouldn't make headlines. That's just the way it is, and I respect that. I respect where she comes from and the constituency that she represents, and she has afforded me that. And we have agreed as partners on the Energy Committee to work on those areas where we can achieve consensus, recognizing that there will be parts that I want to advance, that she is not going to be able to join me in that bipartisan consensus. So maybe we set that off to the side, maybe we approach it in a different way. But it requires being honest with one another, it requires being open with your committee, and a commitment to produce. Mm-hmm. And I'll just be a little bit off subject here and suggest that sometimes it seems that there is greater effort made to take things down rather than to create a product. And I think we've made a commitment to advance this country's energy policies, something that now hasn't been done in a decade. Mm-hmm. So it's well past time. I think you will see that commitment coming out of the committee. As far as the second part of your question or your inquiry here in terms of other things, maybe on the administrative side or what we are doing, for instance, through use of the Congressional Review Act, you have seen some approaches that in a roundabout way will certainly help with regards to how we are able to advance some energy priorities. When you think about the energy projects, whether it is a hydro relicensing or whether it is a pipeline or whether it's a permit for a renewable project, we can't get these things done and this energy basically online unless we can do more to address what is a problem with the regulatory structure and making sure that we have kind of cleared the underbrush on some of the things that I think many would say just don't seem reasonable. A hydro relicensing, not a new dam, not a new hydro facility, but a relicensing on average is taking over 10 years and millions, tens of millions of dollars to do a relicensing. That just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So working on the regulatory, which I think will have a cooperation from the administration. We've seen, again, I mentioned the executive order that certainly from Alaska's perspective gives us greater opportunity for access on the energy front, and then working our energy legislation, I think, are three different areas that you're going to see activity.
That's great. Senator Cantwell, places where you see opportunity or things to be concerned about even too?
Well, you brought up, and I think Senator Murkowski was trying to respond to the latter part of your question about the administration. I don't know what the administration's agenda is here. To me, I think he needs to hire a futurist. He needs to understand what the future of energy is really going to look like and plan for that instead of trying to hold on to the past. Now, the transformation that's going to happen, yes, we need to plan for that as well. But I think, I so appreciate where Senator Murkowski has been because she tried to put the next steps in place in a bill and led her side of the aisle and led the discussion with our side of the aisle. And last December, you would have been proud of us. It was Sunday night. We were sitting around the final phases of negotiation. The staff had been eating pizza for 3 days. They had worked so hard. And, we wanted to get this bill done. I mean, we literally marched over together, she and I, at like 10 o'clock on Sunday night to where are our House counterparts? Where is Speaker Ryan? We want to move this bill. So, I mean, we went to every effort. I think we left notes on people's desks.
Yes.
So I think we were like, we're here, where are you? And the issue is that, things like cybersecurity, which were in the bill, major issues for us to address in making sure that we're planning for the fact that our grid and that energy structures and pipelines are targets of malware that is being pushed through the system. We have utilities complaining. We have specific pipelines. We wanted to get that done. She mentioned hydro. There were things on the grid and grid efficiency. There were things on workforce. Everybody here would tell you we need a workforce to continue the production of U.S. energy product, and that is something that we are shy on having to do, and we wanted to see that in a plan. So I think she's right. We never are going to give up in getting our House colleagues to, I can be a little more blunt here than she can. I don't think that we're ever going to getting our House colleagues to get up to speed on what is the next steps in energy that we can agree on. And I think that's what Senator Murkowski outlined. We're not going to agree on everything, but there are things that are the next steps in the transformation of energy that are important to get done, and we should get them done. And that has always been my attitude. I think the transformative nature of where we're going on distributed generation is so big. We should have an energy bill every year, and you should just pass out. When I first got here, reliability standards had been held up for I don't know how long, just because people wanted it had to be a piece of some big vehicle. Why couldn't we just do reliability standards? Or like she's saying, why can't we just get some of this done? So we're going to work very hard to get our House colleagues to understand that these are policies that 85 senators agreed to. And it is not something that was just pushed out. Like, it's not like she and I got to work and just say, here's what we want, and stuck it in a bill. This was hours on the floor. Everybody realized we were a vehicle that was going to pass. I can't tell you how many, I think we said we worked out over like 100 different policy members from various members who came to us and said, could you work this out? Can you work that out? Some of which were somewhat in our jurisdiction, some that were peripheral to our jurisdiction, and we worked them out. So hard work should be rewarded, and that's what our House colleagues and Speaker Ryan have to realize, that energy needs to move forward. I will just say this one note too. We also think of these things in the context of, when we think, she and I and many of our committee members think of things in the terms of our public lands as well. And we had a great provision in here to stop fire borrowing and make the right investments for the future in helping us on the catastrophic nature of fires that we are seeing. And we also had innovative ideas on how to put into production cross-laminated timber. Again, another idea of energy efficiency in the context of ways to build more efficiently and store carbon instead of letting it all burn up. But she went to great degree to get even our Mitch McConnell, Leader McConnell, to weigh in, and still our House colleagues just didn't quite grasp how important these policies were and why they needed to move forward right now. So if any of you have sway, please tell them to pick up the material and read it, or talk to their constituents, because I guarantee you that this hard work should be given a passing grade in the House of Representatives.
And I just might add on that, we've been pretty busy in the committee. Yeah. People and I've actually had a couple of folks say, well, we haven't seen any of the nominees come out of your committee other than Zinke and Perry. Well, it's because we haven't been given the names to act on. But we actually had a chairman's meeting a week or so ago, and the leader asked, so what's been going on in the various committee? And you hear from this chairman, well, we're in the process of moving this bill out, or we're working on this one, and we've got an oversight here. It comes around to me, and I said, well, this week we moved out 65 bills. And he says, what? And everybody looks at me like, dang it, Lisa is always one-upping us with bigger and better. We're tired of her talking about Alaska and size, and now she's moved out 65 bills. And in fairness, these were bills, again, that have had some degree of process through the committee. Public lands bills that can be very, very parochial in nature, but extremely important to the members and the people that they represent. So, yeah, we are moving as a committee, and moving quickly and in a joint and a bipartisan way.
Well, that's great. And we will commit to having some of the folks from the House side come and answer some of those questions about what they want to move forward. So
that should be the next panel.
That should be the next one this afternoon. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes left for questions. I want to make sure we can get in as many as possible. So if you please raise your hand, I'm going to pick a few of you. Name and affiliation, question in the form of a question is always very appreciated. We'll start right here. Are there others too? We'll go there and there. Okay.
Thank you. Bob Powers of the Nuclear Energy Institute, and I want to thank you both for your inspiration. The way you cooperate really is, it reaffirms some of what we think the political system and how it should work. So thank you. Right now in this country, we're not building the number of reactors that we thought we would be building, say 5-10 years ago, primarily due to low natural gas prices. And thank you both for your efforts to get FERC nominees nominated and confirmed. I think there's a lot that needs to be done in the markets and a lot that needs to be fixed. We're only building 2 in Georgia, 2 in South Carolina. The international market is all that much more important. There are countries around the world building at a faster rate than we are, and we need to make sure that American companies can compete for that business. The international competition is overwhelming at times, and thank you both. The Export-Import Bank is critical to us. Thank you both for trying to get that up and running.
We're going to get to a question because we've got to fit 3 in 10 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks.
So I just want to say thank you for your efforts. We need to make sure that we keep the leadership role that we have in this country by allowing our workers and our companies to be on the ground. If we can remove some of those barriers to exports, that would be very helpful, make us more competitive, and make sure that we have the smart people in this country working, but also working overseas. So thank you.
Okay, and we're going to go right here to David. And we'll do Nick and Bill, but you got to be fast.
Great. David Goldwyn, Atlantic Council. A question about LNG exports. They've become controversial again, both exports, I would say also exports to Mexico because of the NAFTA issue. And also, I think Senator King has a bill raising questions about new forms of analysis for LNG exports. Is this now an area with our abundant supply of commonality between the two of you supporting LNG exports? Are you happy with the process? Or do you see some sort of a bill to help expedite and make that process more certain as part of your agenda?
Okay, can you pass it to Nick right there?
Well, I'll answer very quickly because I think my position on supporting LNG exports is well known. Alaska, in fact, has been the leader in LNG exports. We exported for 40 years before anybody even paid any attention. We were sending it over to Japan. And so we're very proud of that. LNG exports and the policies that we were dealing with last year yielded a very important discussion. As you know, we had, as part of our energy bill, a provision that would allow for greater definition in terms of the timing for that export. I still think that it's important to put that into law. And well, the imperative may not be as great as it was in the last administration because of a different view coming out of this administration. I still think it's important that we have legislative language outlining that.
All I can say is the House just couldn't take yes for an answer, so don't know what to say.
Okay.
Talk
Nick.
to them.
Hi, Nick Snow with the Oil and Gas Journal. Since you both said that your constituents are very interested in keeping energy costs down, would there be any possibility that raising the federal gasoline tax, which hasn't been increased since 1993, be an exception?
Okay, and then let's go to Bill really quick there.
Hi, Bill Hederman, University of Pennsylvania. I wanted to ask about FERC and how do you expect the commission to get repopulated? Will it go more quickly one by one or pairs, or you need a bundle of 4 now? I'd be interested in what you're expecting and what you'd like to see on that.
I'd like to see some names now. The joke on FERC is the names are, the nominees will be imminent. And I said, I have no idea who imminent is, but just please send him or her quickly so we can confirm them. It's very frustrating that we are here at May 3rd, and there has not been a quorum for the FERC for months now, 2 months. We can't do much of anything in the energy space until there is a functioning quorum within the FERC. So in terms of how we're going to handle them, first we need to get names so that we can actually act as a committee. Believe me, I am urging anybody who will listen that they need to get moving on it.
I'll just say amen.
Thanks.
And what about, let's take the gas tax issue. Has politics changed on gas tax? We had a little bit of a conversation about it in the transportation bill at the end of last year. It came up sort of, in the press cycle, not yesterday, but is there a difference of opinion on the gas tax, especially if we start to talk about infrastructure, right? I mean, paying for infrastructure is a big to-do, and how we do that in transportation is going to surely come up as part of an infrastructure discussion if we have one over the next several years.
I think on gas tax, I am one that has said, I think Americans understand kind of this nexus between your gas and providing for road infrastructure. And if there's any tax out there that they may be more amenable to, this one makes sense, and recognizing that it has not been increased in the period of time that it has, and the need to deal with our highway trust fund. There's a lot that lines up that says this ought to be ripe for discussion. I will tell you, as as a senator coming from a state that has some of the highest gasoline prices in the country. In some of my communities, I've got folks that are paying $7 a gallon for their gas, and this is not only gas for a truck, but if it's in a village that doesn't have a road, you still have to be able to move your snow machine, and you have to be able to fuel up your boat so you can go subsistence hunting. So I'm very conscious of what that may do to already extraordinarily high prices.
Yeah.
So there's a sensitivity there.
Senator Cantwell, what about you in Washington?
This is where Alaska and Washington are our own market, so to speak. That's what everybody tells us, along with California and Oregon. And we always have the highest gas prices in the nation, no matter what happens. So it's, it's not where we go. It's not where we've been spending our time because of that. And we want markets to work, and we want them to work efficiently. But regional distance puts us. We have their oil comes to Washington. We refine it at 4 refineries, and yet we still have also highest gas prices. So the West Coast is very, very concerned about these markets, and always concerned about those impacts on consumers.
Okay. That patient gentleman in the back who I skipped over before, we've got 2 minutes, so you're going to be quick.
Hi, Jeremy Dillon with CQ Roll Call. The administration has undertook this review of the electric grid through the Department of Energy. Part of that may be aimed at some of the wind and solar tax credits. I'm just curious if you guys think that's politically tenable in Congress, whether that kind of picking winners and losers, as they say, is something that Congress will take up as well.
Well, I think where we were on this budget that just came out, I mean, the president's skinny budget, horrible on the investments that we wanted to see on the renewable side and the electricity office and the innovation. And yet, if you look at what we were able to put on the table that we're going to pass, all that restored. So, look, these issues are not Democrat and Republican issues when it comes to what Cory Gardner wants in Colorado, or other parts, of the country, Richard Burr. There's places where these issues are taking hold, and you're going to have good bipartisan support for them, whether the president supports them or not.
And just finally, I think it's important that we recognize that a review of where we are with our infrastructure is not a bad thing. Yeah. We were talking earlier about in so many parts of the country where you really have energy in transition. And whether it's areas that have been baseload nuclear that are now receiving into the grid a lot of the solar and other integration, how this all works. So for us to be reviewing where we are in terms of our energy infrastructure as a whole is, I think, pretty timely.
Yeah, Secretary Moniz did a great job on the quadrennial review, and I keep telling people to look at that as our blueprint for moving forward, and it outlines the growth opportunity from a job perspective, and I think that that's so important. So, yes, Mr. President, hire a futurist. You'll see where the jobs of the future are.
Well, listen, I want to thank you both very much for helping us kick off this series. I think it's really important to think about the win-win opportunities that exist at different states. I think you've pointed out ways in which both Alaska and Washington State are moving forward and thinking about the future of the energy sector and how you're translating that into energy policy at the federal level. So thanks for spending time with us, and we hope you'll come back and do it again.
Thank you.